Welcome to this explainer, everyone. Today, we are unpacking one of the absolutely most fascinating, hardworking, and frankly critical ecosystems on our planet. We're looking at the ultimate coastal engine, mangroves. Now, as future ecologists, conservationists, and climate scientists, you already know that not all forests are created equal. So in this explainer, we're going to track mangroves on a journey from their incredibly resilient physical root structures all the way up to their massive global biogeochemical impact.
Okay, let's dive into this because it's a question that completely defies standard terrestrial biology. Seriously, how does a forest survive drowning in salt water twice a day? Think about it. At low tide, these organisms are basically baked by the sun in highly saline mud. And then at high tide, their lower halves are entirely submerged in oxygen-poor seawater. To survive this extreme intertidal environment, a plant has to tolerate just wild swings in salinity, temperature, and moisture. They are literal evolutionary marvels, and understanding how they pull this off is the key to understanding their immense value to our globe.
Here is our roadmap for today's journey. First up, we'll meet the coastal guardians. Second, we'll examine nature's shield against storms. Third, we'll dig into a thriving intertidal web. Fourth, we'll zoom out to the blue carbon engine. And finally, restoring our mangrove forest. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Meet the coastal guardians. Life at the intertidal edge. So out of all the world's trees, only about 80 highly specialized species are considered true mangroves, thriving right there at the harsh boundary between land and sea. But because they absolutely cannot endure freezing temperatures, these 80 species are strictly restricted to warmer tropical and subtropical climates. Looking at the data for 2025, the worldwide mangrove area sits at about 15.9 million hectares. But notice the geographical concentration here. Just 5 countries, Indonesia, Brazil, Australia, Nigeria, and Mexico, collectively host almost half of the entire global mangrove area. Indonesia alone commands a massive 3.4 million hectares. Section 2. Nature's shield against storms. The physical buffer. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how mangrove root structures provide an invaluable service to adjacent coastlines through a very precise physical sequence. Step 1. Those iconic stilt-like roots act basically as physical brakes, slowing down the movement of incoming tidal waters. Because the water slows down, we get step 2. Suspended fine sediments actually drop out of the water and settle. This means the mangrove is literally building its own environment. Finally, in step 3, during extreme weather like tropical cyclones, these massive root systems actively dissipate high-energy wave erosion and storm surges. They serve as a living, structural wall of defense. To show you just how incredibly effective this physical buffer is, consider the number 80,244. Over in Tamil Nadu, India, villagers in Naluvedapathy planted exactly 80,244 mangrove saplings, creating a dense kilometer-wide belt of trees. While, when the devastating 2004 tsunami struck, much of the surrounding coastal land was entirely flooded. But because of this dense mangrove shield, that specific village suffered minimal damage. It's a profound real-world validation of their protective power. Section 3. A thriving intertidal web. Nutrient cycling in the mud. Mangrove ecosystems are highly productive, which is actually a bit of a paradox because tropical intertidal waters are often really nutrient depleted, especially lacking in nitrogen. So how do they do it? The secret is the holobiont. A holobiont is an animal microbe association. In mangroves, fiddler crabs are the main ecosystem engineers. They continuously rework the muddy sediment by digging burrows, a process called bioturbation. But here's the wild part. The microbial biofilms living right on the crab's hard shells are hotspots for nitrogen transformations. The crabs and their microbes literally team up to pull essential nitrogen into the ecosystem. And all that rich organic matter? It doesn't just stay in the swamp. This brings us to the outwelling hypothesis. This is the concept that mangroves act as coastal engines, exporting locally derived particulate and dissolved organic carbon out into adjacent habitats like seagrass beds and coral reefs. Mass balance evaluations show that the carbon fixed by mangroves greatly exceeds what is just stored in the forest itself, meaning these systems actively feed neighboring estuary and food webs. Section 4. The blue carbon engine. Global climate regulators. Now, you've likely heard this term a lot in your environmental studies, blue carbon. This refers to the carbon captured by ocean and coastal ecosystems. And guys, mangroves are among the planet's absolute best carbon scrubbers. They actively move carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into long-term storage, keeping it safely locked away in the anoxic marine sediments, buried deep beneath their roots. The sheer scale of this carbon capture is just staggering. Mangrove net primary productivity is on the order of 208 teragrams of carbon per year, and the storage mechanism is fascinating too. Fungal and bacterial processes and even local termites process the fallen leaf litter, roots, and wood into peat. As the termites build their nests, this super carbon-dense peat is eventually buried over time, stabilizing the chemistry and storing the carbon safely in the sediment. So the crucial point is this astronomical figure, 4.19 gigatons. That is the massive amount of blue carbon that was stored globally by mangroves as of 2012. It's an enormous figure that really highlights why the ecological significance of these wetlands simply cannot be overstated when we talk about natural climate regulation.
Section 5. Restoring our mangrove forests. Anthropogenic threats and ecosystem-based adaptation. We have to face the hard facts here. Adequate data shows that historically, roughly 35% of all mangroves have been destroyed. Now, while the global loss rate has thankfully slowed down since the year 2000 to somewhere between 0.16% and 0.39% annually, the steep cost of that loss remains very apparent. Between 2012 alone, the 2% of global mangrove carbon lost equated to massive potential emissions of approximately 0.31 gigatons of CO2. Let that sink in. When we lose the forest, we don't just lose our physical buffer, we actively release the stored carbon.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast when we look at human exploitation. Shrimp farming alone causes about a quarter of all mangrove destruction. But just look at the difference in methods. Closed pond aquaculture requires bulldozing the entire forest, pumping the water full of antibiotics, and eventually abandoning the ponds, which leaves behind massive wastewater that causes ocean deoxygenation and hypoxia. Conversely, integrated mangrove shrimp aquaculture is connected right to the natural tides, results in far less disease, and crucially preserves the forest canopy. It absolutely proves that sustainable coexistence is entirely possible.
Fortunately, global conservation and reforestation efforts are getting highly innovative. Down in Gazi Bay, Kenya, local communities are actually generating direct income through carbon credits, based entirely on the emissions they save by protecting their mangroves. Technologists are now jumping in too, using seed-slinging quadcopter drones to do weeks of planting in mere days. And in Java, Indonesia, where severe flooding occurred after their mangroves were lost, they've built permeable brushwood barriers inspired by Dutch coastal techniques to catch sediment and give floating mangrove seeds a stable, elevated base to naturally germinate and restore the coastline. So we've tracked the mangrove from its sediment-trapping stilt roots to the nitrogen-fixing crabs right there in the mud, all the way to its storage of gigatons of blue carbon. Which leaves us with this final question to consider for your ongoing studies. If these coastal engines act as our primary physical defense against extreme weather and our primary biological defense against excessive carbon, can we really afford to lose even one more hectare? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep exploring the incredible mechanics of our natural world.